Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Romulan mission creation enabled in the Foundry. However, it seems no one's able to find these missions once they're published. So, we have a little ways to go yet before we can make exclusive Romulan missions. We do have new assets. Nearly all the Romulan ships and many of the C-Store and Lockbox ships have been added to the costume creator. We also have Romulan ground costumes in the costume creator, however, is missing many options. So you might have what we call some incomplete baby steps in the right direction. Now, on with the show. On tonight's program, we talk about how to get players to replay Foundry missions.
But just because I enjoyed it, I'll go back and replay it just because I enjoyed it.
We review one of the first Romulan missions created for the Foundry.
Very appropriate. This is just the sort of planet that would want to reach out to the Romulan Republic, the fledgling Republic, and it's just the kind of planet that Datan would say, yes, we will help you.
And a question for the community.
As a community, how do we improve morale?
Join us on the Foundry Roundtable.
Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your Titan Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is Greendragoon, who leaked evidence of the government's secret plan to put subliminal messages in oatmeal commercials.
Oatmeal.
Markhawkman, who knows the terrible secret of what really happens when a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it. And Hippiejohn, who is fresh from his latest bout with Rage Quit Syndrome.
You know, Earl Grey tea and cats, it's the best medicine in the entire universe.
You know,
Data had it right.
I was thinking about it the other day, and there actually is, as I recall, a measurable biological response from small animals like cats or tribbles.
There is. There is. Like when I get mad about things, having my house cats around really improves my mood.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There's definitely some sort of connection there.
Certainly.
Even Spock noted a calming effect.
That's true.
Reluctantly. Let's start with news. We have some patch note news. The patch notes for Tribble for July 30th had a thing for the Foundry in them. It says, updated the playable volume of the Kase UGC ground map. Now, I'm going to guess because I haven't been on Tribble to look. I think this is one of those maps that got like half of it cut off in the Legacy of Romulus.
And ended up with a bunch of items outside
of so everybody had their items outside the playable area. Is that correct?
Sounds like it.
Anybody know? Anybody use this particular map?
I'm not sure.
Because there were several. One of them was the ice. One of them the ice caves.
The ice caves.
One is a Gorn map.
Yeah.
It's the one that goes with the research and rescue mission where you're running around this jungle planet shooting a whole crapload of Gorn because they decided to annex the planet, more or less. I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, it says they've updated the playable volume, so hopefully that one is back to normal, and maybe this is going to be a sign that we'll get the other ones back to normal soon. That'd be good, because I know there's a number of people with missions that are unpublishable right now.
That or K-Say is one of the Klingon starbase here.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember, honestly.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. Excellent. And then, just this morning, which is July 31st, there were two notes in the patch notes for Tribble. Resolved a Foundry issue with Drozana Station, and what I believe this is people were having issues, there were some people you could set as talk to contacts, on Drozana Station, of course, because they updated the Drozana map, the social map, those no longer worked. I mean, it was affecting, like, Soridim's mission, which is a Spotlight mission. That's bad to screw up Spotlight missions. So hopefully that will fix that. And the other one is Foundry character creation no longer fails for Klingons.
I hope that one works.
That's definitely good because, I mean, we've had a lot of people who have been trying to make Foundry characters as Klingons to make and test Klingon missions, and it's been failing.
Need them, but it helps.
And
Need, no, but it's certainly easier.
And Cryptic Frost chimed in about this and said that he tested this fix and it seemed to clear the problem.
Good. And that is about as much of the news as there has been this week. So why don't we go to the Frost Report? Greendragoon.
So the big thing this week was Kerfat actually made a interesting discovery. He basically discovered that the primary cause, cause of the long loading times is triggered when you basically add a object from the asset list onto a map. And after you do this, it'll start adding serious loading times to map previews. Up until that point, the previews will actually remain normal. And it was then Casmodian who came in, who basically said, or discovered, this is, a way to get around this is to, instead of like going over to the asset window along the side, is take an existing object on the map, duplicate it, and then on the bottom in the properties panel, you'll see a drop down that basically lists what object is, or what object is assigned to that asset. And you can then, from there, go and swap it, and it will have no impact on the loading times. So this is actually a workaround that is, at least for the interim, until we can get a proper fix for this.
Now we should explain a little bit about what you mean by swapping.
Basically, every object can be, there's a property that defines what the asset is used for an object. And this can actually be changed on the fly. For instance, let's say you wanted to change the color of a door you're using. You can actually click on that drop down and choose a different door, or if you wanted to change it to a bush. It's basically a different way of adding objects to the map instead of directly from the asset list. But Cryptic Frost chimed in and basically took all the notes and basically said that he was passing along this new info to the devs who are working on the problem, and hopefully it'll lead to some new insight and hopefully can get this fixed.
Well, I think that's kind of good. I mean, helping out the devs, maybe that's something they never thought of. That it was, the issue was placing things from that side.
Yeah, and the hardest part about bug fixes is isolating the bugs. So anyway, we can help to... Yeah, anyway, we can help to get
I've done enough actual coding work of my own to know that it's really, really, really hard to anticipate what changes to the code are actually going to do. I mean, you have your desired goal, and if something happens as unexpected, well, guessing what it was might take a while.
Yeah, I mean, and as much data as they can get is essential to tracking down where this problem occurs.
Yeah, so one thing is make sure when you get that little cryptic error thing pop up, if you crash, make sure you always hit submit. Don't just close it.
and in fact, Cryptic Frost, can use to encourage anyone who does get a crash, and especially if you get that crash number, to quickly copy it and then get to the forums, into the Foundry Bug forums, and make sure you post it. Because the more they can get of those, the more that they can isolate to this crash occurred when this happened, the better the chances are that they can isolate where the problem is occurring and get it fixed. It's very much a cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? All right, anything else from the Frost Report you want to mention?
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, let's get into what we've been working on. I can start us off because I've got sort of a question to ask you guys. All right, I've been writing this scene, and the question is sort of about how far to take your characters. It's for Federation, and the scene is this: you're interrogating somebody. Now, my instinct would be to have, and I want to ask you guys what you would feel like if I did this. It's just a little line, but okay, you're interrogating this subject who is essentially throwing every question back in your face, and making you really frustrated with him. And obviously you're Starfleet officers, so you're not going to, the first thing you do is not torture the guy. But my thought was to make your probably your tactical officer chime in and say, just give me 5 minutes alone with him, sir. I'll get you the information. What would you feel if I did that?
That's really tricky because it really depends on who's asking. Worf, I could see saying something like that. Tuvok, I could not see saying something like that. If this was my mission, I'd probably try and rephrase it and let the captain make the decision. So maybe the tactical officer says something. This guy isn't being very cooperative. How do you want to handle it? Mm-hmm. Do you want to A, do something much nicer, or B, beats the snot out of him?
Now the other alternative I can.
When you mentioned this earlier, the first thing I said is that some of my characters with their backstory that I created for some of my characters wouldn't bother waiting for the tactical officer to just beating the crud out of somebody.
Yeah, it's really hard to.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of an RP question, isn't it?
So there's the my tactical officer would never act that way thing. That of course is going to come up for some people who, have that situation come up. You might be able to handle that with, earlier in the mission somewhere, have your tactical officer mention, if we're having trouble getting information out of someone, sir, I suggest that we, make a suggestion from him that he can do a good cop, bad cop sort of routine.
Well, also,
so that when it comes up, it's not a shock.
Also, another possibility is to use an allied NPC as the bad cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, create a character. That was sort of my alternative, is create maybe, a security officer who's in there that you talk to first, you get to know him just a little bit, and then he says that, and it's like, you give the captain the option to go along with it, because the idea is going to be that your situation is fairly desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're going to be pushed to the edge. You need this guy to talk to essentially to survive.
Okay.
How far are you willing to go and give the captain that choice?
Yeah, the captain, at least you can kind of deduce his motivations from the questions. It's a lot harder with the bridge officers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, it's a shame you're not writing a Romulan mission, because then I would say go for it.
Well, I don't know. That's another one, because depends on what sort of Romulan mission you're writing.
True, but
whether you're going more with the Romulan Republic's attitude towards things, or more the Tal Shiar's, or somewhere in between.
But even in Cryptic's writing, they've implied that the Romulan Republic is not bound by the same rules as the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not having feelings about torture that the Federation will.
Well, that's something I want to talk about later when we get to mission reviews.
Because has made his stance on Thalaron weapons very clear, and that's something that the Federation thinks nobody should ever even own. Gatan's stance is basically, we're going to avoid shooting them at people we don't like. We're only going to shoot them at people we don't like.
There was a huge old thread about that in the general forums.
Yeah.
About Thalaron weapons, and, because Romulans have access to the scimitars now, people thought the Federation ought to disown them. Which, I can see the argument on that.
Yeah, I don't think. I think the diplomats would say we could disown them, but that won't get them to disarm. So we're better off sticking with them and trying to convince them to disarm them.
Probably,
yeah.
But that's an entirely different subject.
That's an entirely different subject. But what I was going to say is giving a mission a Romulan Republic feel is something I want to talk about later when we do mission reviews, because of the particular mission that we're going to review. So, I don't know. I think I'm leaning towards more creating a character to put this option forward to the captain.
That could definitely work.
Mm-hmm. Rather than do their, have it be their tactical officer.
Some nice, slightly shady guy from Starfleet Intelligence?
It could be. I haven't settled on who it's going to be, but I can't talk too much about this mission just yet, but it's definitely the thing I've been working on the most. I haven't been in the Foundry much, but I've been thinking about this mission, because this interrogation was like the source of a lot of writer's block for me over the past couple of weeks. And I just actually sort of broke that by figuring, what it was going to be that gets this guy to talk. And I kind of finally figured out what that's going to be, and it's not going to be the torture if you choose to go that route. It's going to be something else that breaks his pride rather than his body or his mind. And I thought that was sort of
the Gould approach.
A little bit, yeah. I love a good Stargate reference. All right, Mark, what have you been working on?
My own personal mission. I actually did republish one of my missions last week. I did a few typo fixes and a few other minor tweaks. It was my KDF mission, Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant. But, it was just a few minor tweaks.
Like, what sort of tweaks?
Mostly typo fixes. There were a few things that I moved a tiny bit that most people probably wouldn't notice. But,
Remind us what that one's about.
It's the one where your KDF character gets summoned to the Great Hall on Kronos, and one of Jim Potts' aides gives you a mission to go to a Dominion planet and attempt to open trade negotiations with the Dominion. Why? Well, apparently Melanie Diane, the current leader of the Orions, thinks that having the Dominion as a trade partner would give the KDF a tactical advantage in the Federation War. And that's the Klingons' angle, is that they're trying to, get the resources they need to make everyone else's life. And so you get sent to talk to the Vorta to start opening trade negotiations, and that's a pretty good summary.
Excellent. All right, Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
Well, I have been, as you can probably expect, in part 2. I actually took a little bit of time this week to go back and take care of something that you and Hippie had brought up for me when I had to do a test. And it was basically this particular scene earlier in the story that is a turning point for the story. And when I had you guys playtest it, you basically kind of glazed right over it and then felt confused with everything by all of the results of it. So I basically went back and completely redesigned that particular scene so that it's much more first in your face. I mean, it's impossible now to ignore because it requires interaction from you, but it also kind of builds up the struggle of the scene and just makes it a little more dramatic. And I definitely think, it's definitely a nice change that I'm pleased with, and hopefully, it'll really resonate with people.
Well, I'm glad, because whenever you suggest something to a Foundry author, you hope it's going to make the mission better and not worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's one of those things that never would have even occurred to me if you guys hadn't done that playtest with me.
This is something I'd recommend to a lot of authors: is find somebody who will do a playtest, who will play along with you and talk to you as they play.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Oh yeah, those are very helpful.
And if I'd be certainly willing to do that for anybody. I'll just put that out there. Post in my thread for where I was looking for new missions to review. Post in there if you want me to play along with you. I'm personally willing to do that.
Something else I found out really helpful with part 1 was when Nadrona played through part 1, he was doing his video series, and that I found really interesting. Even though he didn't record any audio for it, I think he just played music the whole time. It's still just watching him, how he interacted with everything, especially the fact that this is after the fact, so I can't tell him, oh, you're supposed to do this, or you can't do this. I just had to sit there and kind of cringe when he started doing things like, you're not supposed to do that. But it really made me think about how am I supposed to tighten this up so people can't run off the map and get lost or something?
Mm-hmm. Players will find those chinks in the armor.
Yeah.
Every time.
But yeah, it was really a fascinating thing to watch. Just how someone was actually playing it versus how I thought they should be playing it.
Well, I'm glad we were able to provide that for you.
Yay!
Well, let us know when the rest of it is ready, and we'll do another playthrough. All right, Hippiejohn, what have you been working on?
I'm working on a vault and I've succeeded, and I've had to do one of those things that you talked about where I take one map and I have the player do a bunch of stuff on this map, and then I put them in a box. I use a trigger while they're in the box to completely change the map outside of them, so that when the box opens back up, they have been transported into the vault of a Ferengi casino following a plan that they've made with a bunch of other... I'm writing a heist.
Cool. I like it. So you were in the chat room last night talking about this, and you were wondering what base map to use. What did you settle on? Or have you?
I have. I wanted to end up using the perfect map to use for the casino would actually be Facility 4028. It would be brilliant in many, many ways, but I can't think of a reason to put them in a box in Facility 4028. It makes very little sense in the context of things. So I'm just using Argelia Station and saying that it's lower levels of Drozana, because you're going to be picking up the mission at Drozana, and the entry door is going to be at Drozana. So it's the lower levels there that you, at one point, while you're down there, you get put into the box to be transported, down to the Ferengi casino, and then a trigger that happens while you're inside of the box turns the map around you into the room. Will start with the vault that you're in to steal the thing you're there to steal, and then you have to escape the casino.
And this is for that primetime UGC contest?
Yeah, it is.
Sounds like fun.
How long do you have?
I think they said 4 weeks. And something considering that I have
except for... down to about 3 now.
Yeah, it's probably down to about 3 now, but it's considering that I have the major thing done, which was the going into the box and the room around you. I don't have the full station around you transformed yet, but the room, you go into a box and the room around you can transform. So that's all working as anticipated there. So I'm looking forward to it, to playing with, doing more with it. So.
It's a fun way to eliminate a map transition.
Yep.
For one thing, and to, just change the setting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let's move on to mission reviews. Now, we do something that we hadn't quite done before, which is 3 of us all played the same mission. So let's start with that one, which is Valley of the Shadow by Paxfederatica, who is actually... That's not his name on that's not his @ handle. I can't think of it at the moment. I will go look it up. But Greendragoon, why don't you start us off on this mission?
So, as far as I'm aware, this is the first Romulan mission we've reviewed, right?
Yep.
So
it's one of the first dedicated Romulan missions that I know to have been published.
Yeah, so this is very exciting. Just on that front alone.
Yeah.
And
should say it's meant for Fed Romulans.
Yes, it is available only to Fed Romulans. It's not published on the KDF side. That said, I think if the author decided to go back and just tweak a couple of lines, that it could be adapted to the KDF side just fine. So the part of this mission is basically that you as an officer in the Romulan Republic are being sent undercover to this planet, and this planet is deep in the Romulan Empire space, and is basically controlled by the Tal Shiar. This particular planet has had a very rough history. Going all the way back to Hopus, but they have this resistance that has kind of been around for a while. but is really looking to try and solidify an ally in the Romulan Republic. And the Ditan, seeing kind of kindred spirits in this oppressed people fighting the Tal Shiar, is sending you to basically evaluate them and decide whether or not it's worth supporting them, or whether it'd be a good idea to support them with whatever military or supplies they need. So you're basically sent into this planet undercover on board this freighter, captained by a certain character who is the nephew of a canon character, which I thought was done pretty well. So you go in, and as soon as you arrive at the planet, things kind of start to go wrong. Basically, the freighter overshoots its warp out and ends up in the atmosphere of the planet, is forced to crash, and you're basically beamed off at the last second. You eventually kind of make your way around and then meet up with the Resistance, and it ultimately kind of, in amongst getting them out of this resistance movement, you end up going on a rescue mission to try and save the captain of this captured freighter. And this just leads to more complications in the situation. Ultimately, this is Valley of the Shadow Part 1, and this is actually meant to be a series, so it kind of, while you get out of the situation by the end of it, it's definitely setting things up to continue on. The situation is far from resolved, and in fact, one could argue that things are probably worse off at the end of the mission than they were when you began.
I would agree with that assessment.
So, we want to talk about a story?
Yeah. I really liked it. I thought he did, and I'm going to use a sort of a catchphrase that I saw Thomas the Cat using in reference to Pacific Rim, which is world building, which is creating the setting and the backstory of the setting. And this is something I thought that this author does really well. He has a lot of history behind this planet and why you're going there. And, it's all sort of skippable if you don't care, but I found it to be really good. And I thought it would be very interesting and very appropriate. This is just the sort of planet that would want to reach out to the Romulan Republic, the fledgling Republic, and it's just the kind of planet that Ditan would say, yes, we will help you, or try to.
Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely impressed with the rich backstory, and not only just how deep the author went into this, but how much of the backstory is actually relevant to what's going on in the present story.
Oh, yeah.
Because, all of the politics of this planet are playing into how things are playing out now. And understanding the history really helps you appreciate this story. I'm not saying that it's impossible to enjoy the story without reading all of the background, but it's definitely a much richer experience with reading all the background details and whatnot.
And like you said, I did like the inclusion of, I think since it's an early story point, we can just go ahead and say it. Part of how you get to this planet is you know, in lieu of taking your own starship into the heart of Tal Shiar territory, you take your command crew and go ride on a freighter to get there, which I thought was pretty cool. I always like, I kind of like a story that makes me leave my starship behind. It creates a real sense of, more of a sense of danger. It's like, all those times when Descent is a good example, where the Enterprise beams down a bunch of away teams, but has to go off somewhere and leave those away teams behind. It creates a sense of danger for those away teams. And I enjoy that. But the captain of this freighter is the nephew of Cassidy Yates.
Which is really nice, because, when they first introduced the character, and I realized the connection between Cassidy and this character, my first thought was, oh crud, it's going to be the son of Cassidy, which is kind of problematic from a canon story, but
yeah,
the author completely sidestepped it, made him the nephew.
Mm-hmm.
And
because
I think
we do know that Cassidy had a brother.
Yeah.
That's in the show. So
really, the author demonstrates a lot of really good knowledge in his execution of his touchstones and his basically the way he's built this up. I mean, nothing feels out of place. Nothing. I mean, this all feels like a very believable story.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the story, Mark? Because you were the other person who played this. Mark, are you there?
Is your mute on?
Sorry, I thought I had myself muted. I actually played the other mission that someone posted in your queue today.
Oh, I thought you played this one as well.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Two of us played this. All right. Well, we'll get to you later then.
A couple of things I ran a little bit afoul of, but these are minor quibs. First off was it felt a little bit weird to be getting your orders from the ambassador of this resistance, just because it would seem like such orders would come from a Romulan superior first, and then you would be handed off to the ambassador before.
Yeah, it'd probably go through channels.
Yeah, but most of the cases it's the ambassador saying, "Hey, these orders have been passed on to you." I was like, "Well, who are you? You're not my superior." So, I mean, I would like to see, even if it's just it'd be great if they could make it to Tan, but I don't know if that's doable or not.
You'd have to try and recreate him in the character creator, because I don't think he's in as an NPC or anything.
No, I don't think there's too much about Tan that's outside of the scope of the character creator.
Since we have Romulan Ridges now.
So the other thing that I kind of found odd was the way he formatted his dialogues. He had a lot of interesting things going on there.
There were he used a couple of different things. I mean, he used the buttons as dialogue, but he also on occasion used, the gold text.
Yeah.
As dialogue with, your captain saying something and then somebody else saying something below that.
And he did that with a bunch of characters. I mean, there would be like another character saying something and then the rest of the text was whoever was on screen saying something. Or he would have your bridge officer speak through buttons. And I just found that just a little bit odd. And especially since he was using the gold text for, alternate dialogue, he, couldn't use the gold text for, out of character descriptions. So
you're sort of eliminating a tool there.
Yeah. I mean,
but if you don't ever intend to use it for that, I mean.
Well, he does have out of character stage directions, though. He just puts them in brackets.
Well, I'll say this, it's one of those things where there's no one right way to do it. So, it didn't bother me too much.
Yeah, and
it was definitely something that stood out slightly, but it didn't bother me too much.
And in fairness, like I said, this is a minor quib. I mean, the story is excellent. I mean, he did a great job.
And that's one of the things that I said that I wanted to talk about is I think this really captured the feel of what the Romulan Republic should be about and what their mission should be about, which is what you might almost call this is what I put on the forums in his mission thread, which is, I call it a proto-federation. It's somewhat like how the Federation, or how Earth was in Enterprise. They were starting to be inclusive. They were starting to, you got the sense that they were going to grow into this great galactic civilization of peace and love. But of course, and this is what the Republic is essentially going to be, but with a Romulan twist, which is, there's plenty of subterfuge and Romulanness, you might say. And I thought he captured it very well. And
he had also had a lot of nice little, touchstones related to the Romulan story in it, because I know in one place he made reference to Viranet. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of other nice little touches in there that I remember catching.
Yeah.
That were just kind of made it unique to the Romulan story versus a Fed playing this, which is funny because my Romulan character is KDF side, so I actually had to play this on my Fed character. So for that night I had to
sort of pretending that you were a Romulan.
Yeah.
See, that's why it pays to have characters on both sides. Right now, anyway.
I'm hoping that one day they finally get when they introduce this fabled Romulan tech, that it'll have the ability to not worry about factions.
Yeah, we hope. Shall we talk about the technical side?
Yes, let's go talk about technical.
Go ahead.
A lot of very nice maps in this mission.
I noticed lots of kind of similar to what you do, which is taking an existing map and changing it to suit your needs.
Yeah,
he took, especially there was an interior map that was, I think it's, one of the generic ship interiors.
Yeah,
that he changed into tunnels using things that had rocks on the side of them.
Yeah, and it gives it a very nice, unique look.
Because it's like a grating on the floor and pipes on the ceiling, but rock sidewalls. I thought it was very cool.
Yeah, like stonework.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice a number of clipping
Yes.
planes in quite a few places.
Mm-hmm. Which is, walls that are exactly aligned, and the textures will flicker if there's overlap.
Yeah.
And there's a very easy way to get rid of this, which is just to offset them by like 0.001.
Yeah.
Take every other asset and offset it by 0.001. So, it's not noticeably misaligned from each other, but the textures won't flicker.
Yeah, this is one of those things you kind of got to watch out when you're got snap to grid turned on. Is it'll basically force everything onto the same plane. So if you have walls running along with each other and they overlap, it'll cause that flickering. But like I said, like Dragon said, it's an easy fix.
Mm-hmm. Now I like using snap to grid because it just cuts down on time. Sometimes you just slap in a bunch of walls and they're all aligned nicely. But after I'm done, I turn off snap to grid and offset them. Every other one.
Yeah.
There were a couple other things that I noticed from a technical side, which is, after the freighter crash, where you emergency beam out, it has
and that drop.
Yeah, you fall. Where did your bridge officers end up?
I was wondering that too. I didn't. I mean, I couldn't figure out where they went. I think they showed up eventually.
They were on top of the giant Romulan statue. How they got there, I don't know, because that was way far away. And this may not be something he can fix, to be perfectly honest. And eventually they found their way down from there. I don't know how, but I don't know, it's just very weird.
Could it be a side effect of the drop?
Yeah, I expect that's what it is. But personally, I would just get rid of that drop, just have an emergency beam out and have you on the ground. I don't think it was particularly necessary.
Yeah, I don't think the drop is necessary. It's a pretty high drop. Mm-hmm. You almost kind of got to wonder, how the heck did they survive that?
Yeah. The other one, there were two other things that I noticed, which is he has this point where you are escaping from a compound, a Romulan compound that is under attack from the Resistance, or one faction of the Resistance, and he's got a bunch of Romulan officers that are patrolling. They run out and they run towards the bad guys. But I think he should lower the speed, because as it is, they run really, really fast and it looks very comical.
Well, it was a very Benny Hill moment.
Yes. It's like sped up footage. And the one other thing that I would say for improvement is, his space map at the end. He used a couple of backdrops, which are stars that are very densely placed together. I think it's probably a couple star backdrops overlapped on each other. And I would just try and break that up a little bit, because it was really sort of disorienting.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice if you put
stars piled on top of each other. Put in a nebula or something.
As strange as it sounds, most STO maps have like nebulae and rocks and all this stuff, mostly just to kind of break up the monotony of empty space.
It's not terribly realistic, but who cares?
It's not. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be
fiction.
It's meant so that you can basically don't get sick of looking at nothing but stars.
Yeah. But I found all those densely packed stars to be almost hurting my eyes just a little. So I'd say, take away, make the stars a little bit looser and put in some of the other more, sort of nebula type backdrops.
So something else that I've noticed, even Cryptic does this, and I found that works really well, is color coding systems. For instance, areas that are in Romulan space will often be green. And it's just one of those things that it's not meant to make any logical sense. It's like, why is everywhere in Romulan space green? It's because it's basically a cue for your,
it's a visual cue, because we associate green with Romulans in the same way that we associate blue with Federation, red with Klingon.
Yeah. Klingon will always be red. Cardassians will always be a brown.
Kind of a yellowish brown.
Yeah, it's a funny thing.
Ferengi kind of orangish. Like the orange on the ship.
Yeah, it's just a visual cue.
Ferengi often have this yellowish-green color, or the orange color, either or.
Mm-hmm.
But because remember that the Ferengi logo is actually green with yellow gem in it.
That's true.
Actually, now that I think about it, the yellow gem does look kind of like a lobite crystal.
And I often, I don't necessarily color code my maps to represent factions, but I do like to color coordinate, which is when I'm designing a space map, I'll pick an overall color scheme. I'll say, okay, this system is going to be blue and purple. So the only things I'll pick out of the nebula objects or, any of the backgrounds are going to be blue and purple. And I'm going to pick a planet that will go with that.
So, what did you think of the gameplay? As far as combat and stuff like that?
I thought it was pretty good. I think I died a couple of times in the interior when you're fighting the Tal Shiar.
I died once on that final group, and then almost again. That last group is really hard.
I think possibly it had to do a little bit with the fact that I took in a character that's not very well geared at all. And as a really substandard kit, I need to get him a better kit.
I think it also had something to do with, I think there's two groups. He's using two groups there.
Of captain.
So he's got a captain group and then some kind of support.
Yeah.
So it might be a little bit overkill. Especially with Romulans, because they love to use those Sailoron weapons.
Sailoron weapons, plasma grenades is what was killing me.
Yeah. I thought there was at least one puzzle in there. Was it when you were trying to break into...
And I sort of brute forced my way through it, just picking random numbers until I got it right. Because I'm just not a big fan of puzzles.
Well, that was the thing about the puzzle is, the things it was referencing, like the dates when the Nexus would show up, it's like, how is anyone playing this gonna actually know that?
Maybe he just expected you to brute force your way through it.
That might be. I mean, it might be the intention was to
That might be the intention.
But I don't,
but it seems, I wouldn't have done it that way myself.
Yeah, it seemed like what the hints you were giving were things that almost no one playing this mission would know.
Yeah, it's one of those, either you're an uber nerd or you look it up on Memory Alpha or you do what you guys do.
I would hesitate to have something where people are going to have to go outside the game to look it up.
Yeah. Not everybody has two monitors.
Yes.
Yeah, quite true. Well, I'll just alt-tab when I want to look something up.
It's easy enough to do, but still, I would not do that myself.
Yeah, but I mean, it definitely, there's no way the average player is going to know any of those things, let alone try to decipher which one they're actually supposed to do. Because it gives like 4 possibilities.
Yeah.
For this number.
Now that said, the puzzle itself worked from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say that has to be a hell of a complicated dialogue tree to get one of those to work.
It's basically involves a right path and a wrong path, and actually it doesn't. In that particular one, it didn't even have a wrong path. It just reset when you got it wrong. So I mean, it's not too bad in that case, just because all options except the right one lead back to the beginning.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Any final thoughts? I mean, I would say that this is definitely a must play, and I'm looking forward to the the sequels.
Oh yeah, I mean, anyone who has been waiting for like an actual Romulan mission, here is your chance. I mean, this is it. This is a great first mission for the Romulan Foundry.
And he even used my suggestion of tagging the Romulan Foundry missions with a little, in brackets, ROM in the mission title. So they're easy to search for. So I hope everyone else will do that. Yay. But I think it's definitely a good place to start at from the perspective of Romulan missions.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff definitely is off to a great start. And I mean, I
keep
checked
coming.
this before, and he's only up to 7 reviews. So I mean, guys, definitely
6 of them are 5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily see this being a spotlighted mission.
Well, I'm not sure about it. It's hard to say about that because it's a part 1.
That's true, but it's not that we've never gotten part.
No, it's not the first one. It's just I usually, whenever I see a series, it's part 1 is rarely the best part, to my mind. There's a couple examples I could name, but most of the time, the next parts tend to be bigger and better.
True.
So,
but
I don't know.
If you're going
to spotlight anything in a series, you might as well spotlight part 1. So. Actually, I have to say, and I've been thinking about tweeting Brandflakes this. I don't know when he's going to start up the spotlighting, but I think your mission actually ought to be spotlighted, Greendragoon.
Actually, I've been planning to submit it after I got 2 out.
Yeah.
I thought it would be suicide to try and get it spotlighted while part 2 isn't released.
Yeah, you're probably right. But you got my support. All right, moving on to the next mission, which is, this is one that Mark and I played, called Collectiveness Strikes Gold by Stoutes. This is his first mission. The plot is essentially this. You are tasked to go study an explosion that happened in a mission, or in a system near, in the Cardassian sector, near Borg space. You get there and you study, you try and find out the effects behind this explosion. You encounter some Borg that are still active. You go onto a Borg research station, and at the end, the Borg show up, and actually even the Romulans are somehow involved. He has met this, am I leaving out anything, Mark?
You mentioned that this is actually part 2 of 3, and he's going to do a prequel to this and a sequel.
He wanted to do a KDF prequel, as I recall, and a Federation sequel. This is a Fedside mission. So it's definitely a lot of setup, which we hope he'll pay off, and we will find very interesting and earth-shattering things behind this situation. This is, I think I mentioned, but it's a first-time author, and I thought it was quite good for a first mission. There's a few things you might call nitpicks. One of which would be there are no stars in his space map. He has, I talked about one guy having too much stars, this guy had too few. He had some backdrops that were like nebula, but there was just black beyond that, so I would add a star backdrop to that. One thing I wanted to talk about that I absolutely loved about this mission was his Borg interior. Now, he took one of the, and this is, as I go through this, you'll realize how much work this is for a first-time author. And the fact that all of it worked perfectly is...
I think he used the NGC 4447.
Which is sort of a labyrinth of Borg corridors. It's a very cool map, I thought. And he took it and he destroyed the hell out of it. He put debris everywhere. There's fires. There's explosions that go off as you run by, like millions of them. And all of these this is, some good trigger work here. And he does it well. It all goes off without a hitch, which is great for a first time author. It's fantastic. And the atmosphere of this interior map is like, this thing is going to explode at any second. I got to get what I came for and get out of here. And it was a great feeling to have, when a mission makes you feel that way just through its setting and just the things that are going on around you. I don't know. Did you have the same kind of feeling?
Yeah, that was pretty similar to my thoughts on it, because when you go through it, it's not one of those things where you just kind of like walk around, look at things, maybe poke them with a stick 2 or 3 times, and then go look at something else. It's one of the things where you walk in, there's this console next to you blows up at half a second after you beam in. Then you walk down a corridor, 3 or 4 Borg jump out at you, and then there little maintenance tube things, they sneak in, explode, and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. I think there's only one thing he possibly could have done to make it better, and that would be to have the explosion spawn the debris objects that are laying here, there, and everywhere. But, well, that's just a minor thing.
Or spawn more debris anyway. Because I like that there was some debris already there. Because it shows you that this, a lot of this wrecking happened before you got there. And then have some of it go on while you're there. He definitely, there was another thing in the interior. He set up this interesting biological specimen that you find that isn't really explained yet.
The actual prop is a giant fungus.
Is it?
He carefully embedded it into a wall so that the only part of it that you could see is the base of the fungus.
That's kind of clever, I gotta say.
Yes, because the actual prop he used is one of those giant fungus things that you see on the Born ground map. They're like 80 feet tall and 60 feet
Yeah,
in diameter.
and like partially assimilated.
Yeah, they had this Borg stuff sticking out of it.
Yeah.
So for his purposes, that was pretty much the perfect prop, as long as he could find a way to hide the mushroom cap on the front.
Yes.
Which he did by embedding it in the ceiling.
And that's something you don't necessarily see from a lot of first-time authors, is using just parts of objects rather than the whole object. So, I mean, that's sort of a sign to me that this guy is going to be going places, going to be a pretty good author.
I thought that was really cool, especially because when I took a close look at some of the debris props he used, I made a note of just how much of the debris prop he embedded inside the wall in order to keep the debris from actually blocking the walkway instead of just, sitting there and looking ugly.
Yeah, and none of it blocked the gameplay either.
I've used them myself. I've used some of these objects myself, and they're huge. And he actually pretty carefully arranged them so that they didn't actually get in the way. They just looked like they're going to get in the way.
Yeah. I think the other, because it's only a 3-map mission. Well, a 4-map mission, essentially. He has this bit where you go to Deep Space Nine first and get your orders. But otherwise, it's a very short mission. So if you're looking for, something that's going to take you 15, 20 minutes, this is pretty good for that. Suggestions, would have to see how the rest of the story shakes out. I mean, the dialogue is fairly thin. He doesn't do a lot of dialogue. So, I mean, there's probably room to flesh things out there. And I think obviously he leaves a lot of things unexplained, which I think he's going to explain in other missions. So I'm not going to mark him down for that. I don't know. What did you feel like, Mark, about as far as the story goes?
Well, my biggest comment that I made on it was that there's a huge number of things that he doesn't explain at all in the story. I mean, because, there's the explosion that you're there to investigate. You go, you poke around, you look at things, you almost get exploded 2 or 3 times, and you don't come away with any knowledge about what caused the explosion. And then you find something on the Borg research station, which apparently gets destroyed, and it's never seen again, and, I don't know. It's one of those things.
It leaves more questions than answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Which may have been his intention. Since we know that, I mean, he said that he's going to do several parts. So, I don't know, I'd say this is a good one and a very good first effort. So, Mark, what was the other one that you played?
It's a mission about you as a Federation officer dealing with space pirates. Which, it's something that actually, sort of thing that you would see a lot in the older Star Trek stuff because, the Federation wasn't quite as well established, etc.
What's the name of the mission?
I'm still trying to find it, maybe. But,
this is,
Off the Grid.
Yeah, he just posted it in there today.
Off the Grid.
Yeah.
Got it.
Uprising, Act 1 off the grid. So,
anyway,
space pirates.
Yeah, so there's this mysterious space pirate who has managed to somehow piece together a crew out of members of something like a dozen different races to help him do what he sees as liberating the people of the galaxy from the tyranny of the galactic government. And to this end, he has been hijacking and disabling spaceships near Breen territory, and until you get there, nobody in the Federation has actually managed to identify him as the reason why these ships had gone missing. I mean, obviously people knew they were gone, just not why. Anyways, so you actually do manage to rescue the crew, or part of the crew, of his most recent victim. But it's part 1, so aside from finding out what the guy's general motives are, you don't really find out a huge amount about the guy. Good parts about this, he actually did a very good job of constructing the mission and setting up objects and things. Because he did one of those maps where it's this, huge deathmatch thing, but he was very careful to face the enemies so that it was pretty easy to fight 7 different mobs without having them bum rush you. Which, for someone who hasn't had a lot of experience with the Foundry, that's a pretty impressive trick. But yeah, it's a part 1 of however many, so you don't really learn a whole lot in the story about what's going on. It's just the setup. It comes across reasonably well for an early thing. Yeah, that's it.
All right, sounds good. And that actually kind of is a good segue into our first topic, which is going to be, from a writing standpoint, how much do you want to reveal to the player and when during the story? I mean, because we have a couple of ones tonight that we know are sort of part 1s and don't answer a lot of questions, which can be frustrating, especially if part 2 isn't out yet. Greendragoon.
What?
So I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? Are you the kind of person who you want, as a player, do you want to know everything right away? Or, as an author, do you want to reveal everything right away? Or keep some of it under your hat?
Well, I mean, if you're doing a part 1, you gotta keep something back, otherwise there's I don't know, I guess there's 2 ways of going at it. I mean, you can look at this, like, continuing parts as a further development of the story, where each one is kind of self-contained, but all of them happen to be about the same thing. Or you can do it where it's a more cliffhanger-y, where you do intentionally leave details back in order to entice the person to come back.
Always leave them wanting more, as they say.
That's the kind of idea. I mean, really, if any multi-part series, the first mission has to give them enough that they get into the story, but hold enough back that they really want to get the rest.
Yeah, if you think about it, like most pilot episodes of the very serialized TV shows, they always end with more questions than he started out with. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm thinking things like Fringe or Battlestar Galactica. That after that miniseries, it left you with, are they going to survive? Things like that. So, I don't know. I think one of the challenges we have to overcome as Foundry writers.
Well, one analogy I use would be Stargate Universe, where you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
In Stargate Universe, you literally have absolutely no idea what's going on at the end of the first episode, other than they're on this big ship that they've never seen before.
And they don't know anything about the ship.
Lost was the same way.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I was thinking about when I was looking at this topic is we're sort of limited by the fact that the player is the main character. And if you're doing a TV show, you can show things that the main character is not privy to. So the audience a lot of times, knows more than the main character does. In Stowe, we can't really do that because the player is the main character, so the player knows everything that, the main character knows everything that the player knows.
Right.
And I think that's a little limiting, actually. Because, you can't show what the villain's doing when the player isn't there.
It requires that you think about it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always considered limitations to be opportunities.
Okay, like how so?
Well, for instance,
how so?
Damn you, sir.
If you've watched any TV lately,
such as,
basically, all these kind of pseudo-sci-fi dramas that have kind of become the rage since Run Lost came out.
Pseudo-sci-fi
okay,
dramas.
I know what you're talking about. Yes, pseudo-sci-fi
like
dramas.
Flash Forward, Revolution, like all of those, all of these different.
I like that. I like that term. I had not heard it.
Yeah,
we're really. Is it more like something where the sci-fi is sort of the backseat driver?
Yeah,
it's basically it's where some sci-fi element is introduced to kind of add mystery.
It's usually
to it,
setting something in
but
the setting.
the show is really a drama.
Yeah.
And it's actually gotten very popular. And
I'll go. Yeah, I have been watching some of those. I mean, I watched the first couple episodes of Revolution. Didn't stick with it, at least not yet. One of my favorite shows that's on right now is Falling Skies, which you could call a pseudo-sci-fi drama because a lot of it focuses on the drama between characters.
Yeah.
Not all of it. I mean, it's probably, it's not a black and white label, but
even the truer sci-fi right now is kind of following the same trend.
Sure.
But I mean, often
one thing that I was thinking of that you can do in the way of having outside information is flashbacks and things like that, where you you find out later what the enemy was doing between the first two, like say the third time you encounter somebody, you find out what they were doing between the first and second time, for example.
Yeah, you'd have to find out later what was going on, rather than it being shown to you and then the character finds out later.
But, I mean, anyway, getting to the point I was kind of trying to make with all that, is basically a lot of them follow into this, trap, I'm going to call it, or a trope would be a better term, of you have your main story that kind of more or less wraps up, but leaves things open enough to continue on by the end of the pilot episode. But at the end of the pilot episode, there's always some scene off screen that shows two characters you've met, but not the main characters, that are having like some conversation, and that somehow changes the whole understanding of what just happened in the pilot. And that's their hook.
Okay, yeah.
There's an absolutely great example of that in Battlestar Galactica. At the very end of the miniseries.
Tons of them do it.
At the very end of the miniseries where, Sharon comes in, she's been this main character on the whole show, and you find out at the end that she's a Cylon.
Yeah, so.
What?
And none of the characters know that. And that was like 6, 7, 8 years ago. We can spoil it.
But my point is,
the show's been canceled already. You can spoil it.
By the same token, you can turn around and use that as an opportunity because since your main character is being controlled by a player, you can flip it around and basically leave all of these clues for the player to find. And it suddenly can be turned around that the player is basically working for his story and doesn't realize it. And it then comes around and suddenly he's got this sense of satisfaction of having found this clue that unlocks some portion of your story. So, I mean, it draws in so much more than just watching a show could.
Of course, that can also be used for a huge plot twist. That there was something going on this whole time that you were not privy to. That suddenly you are at the end of the episode and you go, wait a minute, this can make you sit forward and go, wait a minute, what the hell?
Yeah. And in fact, it's actually something that Star Trek kind of tended to do. Where, for instance, Q-Who, first Borg episode, they get out of the situation with the Borg, they're back in the Alpha Quadrant, and just that scene at the end where Guinan's basically saying, it's like, they know who you are now, they're coming. And it's like Picard suddenly realizes the whole ramification of what this means.
What just happened. Well, I did one in the mission that I put out for the contest, the Tholian contest, where it turns out, you thought you were working for one group the whole time. Turns out you weren't. So, I mean, yeah, there's cool things you can do at the end like that to totally flip the whole thing on its head.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities. And the fact that we can, especially as the opportunity to make the player discover it on his own makes it so much more rewarding. I mean, when Lost was on, the reason I actually started watching Lost was because, my office mates would forever be coming up with these Lost theories about where the plot was going and whatnot. And they were just trying to be figuring out from the details they had where the plot was going. And it was such a
they were probably all wildly wrong.
Absolutely, but
that's part of the fun. That's
really,
part of the fun, right?
I mean, it really involved them in the story because they were working actively to try and figure out what was going on. And that's something that a lot of
that was something that I've heard was sort of notorious. As one of the first times when that happened was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because there was that always that long gap between seasons, and it was out as the internet was becoming really popular as far as message boards and chat rooms about TV shows, and people would start speculating wildly as what would happen next season, and they were always completely wrong.
What do you think would have happened if the internet had been around for best of both worlds? Oh, the forum rage.
The forum rage. I can imagine.
So, but I mean, like I said, it's, don't look at a limitation as a limitation, but an opportunity to basically build something around it. I use them kind of like pylons in my story. I'll build off of them and expand upon them, not just run into them and say, oh, how am I going to get around this?
Always be flexible, right?
Exactly.
If you encounter a limitation, rather than throwing up your hands and walking away, find a way to go around it.
But I mean, there are so many great Foundry missions that don't just, sidestep a limitation, but they actually integrate the limitation into their story.
Mm-hmm. And that can be, technical or writing or anything. Any kind of limitation can be flipped on its head. All right, why don't we go into our other topic? Actually, first, I think we'll do our technical topic because it kind of goes into our
leads into the other one.
Leads into the other one. So, Dragoon, give us our technical topic for the day.
So, the technical topic for this week is the illusions and realities of choice. We've often heard the phrase, the illusion of choice. Our stories ultimately have to be linear. Every step on the storyboard has to be completed. That said, and this goes right back into the how do you build off of the limitations, is how do we either fake or even insert choice into our missions, despite the fact that they were originally built as linear tools. Well,
I can talk about this because I have done this in my Mirror Universe mission over there. And it was difficult to figure out how to do it because what I wanted to do is make your choices matter between maps so that, a choice you made on one map would alter how things went on another map. Now that's not technically possible, but there's a lot of things in the Foundry that you could say, this isn't technically possible, but you can do this to fake it.
Well, that actually gets into
then maybe makes it become technically possible.
So I'm kind of curious. When I was writing up the notes for this, and I actually do have the point of how do we basically pass information in to the next map when, in theory, everything we do is wiped with each map transition. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down 3 methods that I could think of. The first one is code memorization, and I was specifically thinking of Rogue Enterprise's own Recidiby.
That's right.
In this one. Mm-hmm. The other one was clever questions, basically interrogating the player subvertly to try and figure out what their choice was in the past map. Then the third one, and I wish I could remember the name of this mission or who wrote it, but it's to make everything one big map. And the mission I was specifically thinking about was one where you're investigating this planet, and once you get into the system, you take a shuttle into the system, and you basically have...
That was Pendra.
Was it Pendra?
Yeah. You go down to this planet because people have detected strange energy emissions from it that make it so you can't take a full-size starship to it. And you find out that there's a super egg-shit computer inside the planet, making the planet's populace do certain things, and also preventing them from becoming a warp-capable civilization when they actually used to have the technical skill required to build the computer. It actually forced them to become a pre-warp civilization.
This is the same one that you have the choice of either going down to the planet or going to the moon?
Yeah, that one. That was a really cool trick he used for that.
Yeah. And basically what happened, I mean, you're on the shuttle, so it starts off in his custom-made shuttle interior. And you basically have the choice, where do we go? We go to the planet, investigate the signal there, or we go to this moon where we're picking up this anomalous reading. So you have a choice, and you choose one. And you'll either end up on the planet or on the moon. You go explore either one, and you eventually end up in this ancient computer. But it was this really cool
I think I might have played that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's been around for a while.
But essentially what he does is, he spawns different objects. Yeah, he spawns different objects based on the dialogue choice that you make, right?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, it's basically like, it's at least 3 different maps. 4 if you count the shuttle interior.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
all in one map.
The way he did this there's only actually one real, true quest objective. Everything else is technically optional stuff that isn't really part of the storyboard for the mission.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the one objective was solve the puzzle.
And that's sort of the main way that we have to do choice, is to have to do it outside of the mission objectives, outside of the storyboard. And to do that, you have to use triggers, you have to use map dialogue, because with map dialogue, you can spawn and despawn objects and NPCs based on the dialogue choice that is clicked.
Yeah, it's actually
you cannot do that with storyboard dialogue. When I say map dialogue, this is the the little blue dialogue bubble that you click and drag from the right hand menu onto the map. Just to clarify.
Yeah,
and that's how I did it in my mission. Is okay, you're going along in this mission. You get to a point where you have to make a moral choice. Do I do this thing or do I not do this thing? There are consequences either way. And the only objective at that point is it says make your choice and get to the transporter room at the end of the map. So all of this is done in map dialogue. I have your officers arguing for, one argues this way, the other argues this way. In the end, it's your choice to interact with this console or not. That is the ultimate choice. Based on that, either a bunch of enemies will spawn between you and the transporter room, or they won't. Now, to carry that across to the next map, I have you make the choice again. I disguise it a little bit with dialogue, but it asks you, did you interact with this console or didn't you on the next map? If you did, it spawned, let's see, how did I do that? If you did, it spawns a bunch of enemy maps, or, a bunch of enemy space mobs, including one right in front of you. If you did not, it spawns a bunch of friendly mobs. And actually what it is, it's either you get help fighting a third enemy, or you have to fight in a 3-way battle, based on what choice you made. And then I even carry it forward into the very end, where the final NPC who's doing your debriefing, he asks you, how did it go? What did you do? And you can either say, it's disguised in the dialogue, you either say, I clicked this console, or I didn't click this console. And based on that, he'll either tell you that you should get a medal, or you should get a court-martial. So, in that way, I have sort of faked multiple endings, and all of that is done outside of the, storyboard. And it took some tricks, it took a lot of figuring things out, because this was right after season 4, so this is a long time ago I made this thing. It took a lot of work to figure it out, but I eventually did. So, that's how I did it. There's some other ways.
It's just one of those things. It could be such an incredible thing, to kind of, pull off something like this, especially when everyone doesn't think you can.
Mm-hmm. Everybody says multiple endings are impossible in the Foundry. Well, yes, but. There's a lot of yes, but in the Foundry.
So, one other thing I want to point up is the idea of multiple endings. And I was kind of thinking of Ali Mac's Mains of Balnar Moon, where you have the choice to try and save a crewman or discover the secret behind everything that's been going on. And so you can do the honorable thing and save them, but you won't find out what's really going on. Or you can choose to go after this, or go try and find the secret and then leave the person to die. So in that case, it was kind of cool. In that case, he ended up using, it was kind of an implied choice, because ultimately the story continues just the same no matter which choice you make. It's just kind of your perception of it that changes.
Well, this discussion leads us into the other thing I want to talk about, which is replayability. This is something that came up on the forums, just today, in fact. Is what makes you want to replay a Foundry mission? Now I'm gonna ask you guys, this is the question that he asked in the forums. Have you guys ever replayed a Foundry mission, and why?
Tons of times.
I recently replayed Duratanium Man because Sorbane needed reviews.
Well, yeah, there's that. His was a special case though because his was bugged and it would never qualify for rewards, so he had to import it into a new slot. So other than that, why have you replayed a mission? If you have.
For the same reason that I watch a movie that I enjoyed again, or that I watch an episode of The Next Generation or the original series or any Trek that I enjoyed. I do it for the exact same reason. Because I enjoyed the story and I want to experience it again a second time. In the Foundry sometimes specifically because I want to make a different choice and just see what the other dialogue option that the person put in there was. But just because I enjoyed it, I'll go back and replay it just because I enjoyed it. No other reason. I don't know that there has to be one. In a game setting, I guess people are replaying the hell out of some missions because they qualify for, double rewards in a day. The Spotlight missions get a stupid amount of plays. So.
That makes me wonder which Spotlight missions people like to replay the most when they've decided that they're going to replay a mission.
The shortest ones?
The ones that I see, you've got Rogue Enterprise's mission, that was the only one there for a long time that is up around 50,000, 53,000 or something like that. And then there are two, I think, that, the Utopia, repairing Utopia Planitia, and don't remember the other one that have like 12 or 13, maybe 14, and maybe 2 that are where mine are, which are just now breaking 10,000. Number of plays.
You're lucky you got a Fedside mission.
Yeah. Fedside gets played more than
it appears Mark had a blackout for a second. He's back on the chat, but we're trying to get him back on the call here.
Okay.
So yeah, I remember, and even back before the rewards changes, things like Duke of Rock's little daily missions got tons and tons of plays.
Yeah.
From a reward standpoint, plenty of people replay Foundry missions.
Are there any of the Grand Nagus missions still around? Because
no.
I played some of those a long time ago, and honestly, while they were short, they actually were half-decent missions.
I can honestly say I never played any of those. But
they were made with a very specific purpose, very obviously. I mean, it was... They were made
no secret
to fill the daily. Yeah, none.
It was made to be one step above the one-click console missions.
Yeah.
Which, there's a niche for things like that. So, I don't know. I've never really replayed many Foundry missions, except when I forget that I've already played them. I think because most of them...
I love that.
Yeah. To be honest, I have a terrible memory. Half the time I see things on the forum and I'm like, what, we talked about that on the Foundry Roundtable, and I have no clue which episode it was. And I usually don't feel like going through all of the show notes. So, but I think probably because a lot of them don't have what you call that replay value where things are different the next time you play through it, if you make different choices. There are a number of them that do, like mine and like Alimax, but for the most part, because of the linear nature of the Foundry, people make linear missions. So I think to make replayability, you have to do something to make them want to play it again, something where it's going to be different the next time and they know it's going to be different the next time.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see like a Foundry mission that's a mission in one map.
Mm-hmm.
It's still...
Hendrick did, that's a good example.
Yeah.
But there's like 4 different ways that the mission can, depending.
Yeah.
Just go nuts with like all of these different branching possibilities. Mm-hmm. And you'd almost want to keep the length down and keep it somewhat short, just because with each new possible branch, the mission becomes that much harder to build. Yep. Which is why Cryptic has avoided branching missions for all this time, is because
they are harder.
It becomes multiplicative amounts of work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I look at the games that I play through multiple times, things like Mass Effect or I think of how many different characters I have in the Old Republic, because there are tons and tons of choices in those games that make the gameplay different each time, ranging from minor choices to major choices.
Well, when I think about games where you have a lot of meaningful choices, I tend to think of strategy-focused games and not story-focused games.
Yeah, because those can definitely play out different times.
Because strategy-focused games, you don't put giant stacks of dialogue associated with each choice. So you have way, way, way more choices.
Yeah. The issue with story-focused games is even if you put in multiple dialogue options, at some point someone will have gone through and played every dialogue option they care about. And then there's no story left.
True, but they've gotten more out of it and spent more time in your game
than most. Yeah.
If you just had one path.
True.
And I especially like the games, and BioWare is sort of the king of this, where you have that sort of morality options, where you can either go through as a renegade and, you know, kill everybody, I'm a badass and I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want, sort of a thing. And then you have that, you can go through it as a paragon where, you know, I follow orders and do my duty for the good of everybody and save all the innocents. I love doing stuff like that because sometimes I have a problem though with being the bad guy because you do really heinous things and then I feel bad about that.
That Jedi Order is full of a bunch of prudes.
So I don't know. I'd say, you know, add options, add side things to do. Anything that gives a sense that people would, you know, think about what makes you want to play things again and put that into your mission.
Some of them, it's just how fun they were, and the story and the dialogue I can do with experiencing again, and sometimes it's because they have those multiple choices. Hero of the Empire, I've played Rogue Enterprise's Hero of the Empire like 7 times at this point because it's got a lot of choice in it and it's a lot of fun. There's no substitute for playing something that's fun.
Oh, one of the things I run into when replaying missions is that I haven't run out of new missions to play.
That's the other thing about the Foundry, is that there's a hell of a lot of missions out there.
Mm-hmm.
And more every day.
You're never going to be able to play every single one of them. There's just too many.
It's kind of like trying to start watching all of Doctor Who now.
All of it?
Yeah, all of it.
Because aren't they, on their, 50th anniversary or something like that?
Yes.
Because, you know, they lost the original video masters and nobody had any copies.
Right.
But still, even if you started with the oldest ones that we have on DVD,
it would take you years. If you watched one a day, it would take you years.
I watched through the entire run of Supernatural, which is 8 seasons, in about a 4-month period, and that was about as much as I could take of watching TV. It was sort of crazy. Because that's a lot.
Television is hard.
It was a lot of effort, man.
I've been rewatching SG-1, and it took me 6.5 months.
I expect so.
Oh, that's why I'm having so much trouble. Nothing was set to 0 altitude. Remember, that's my tip of the day. Remember, kids, set things to 0 altitude.
Also remember to turn off Snap to Grid.
No, I was actually very, very thankful for Snap to Grid with the thing that I was building.
Snap to Grid is useful. You just gotta make sure that,
it was one of those where, like you were talking about, I very strategically was turning it on to get things lined up exactly where I wanted, and then turning it off to go in and offset them by 1,000 of, you know.
Just remember not to, you know, when you get everything the way you want it, remember not to move them again with Snap to Grid on. Because it will mess with things like...
It will mess with the Y.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because Snap to Grid is snapping every axis to the grid.
Yes.
So,
but we want to leave you tonight with a sort of question to the community. So, Hippiejohn, I will leave this to you.
So, I've been I've been having an interesting experience. I mean, Drogan, you introduced me tonight as, back from this latest bout of rage quitting. It's because nothing for me is working right with the Foundry. It just never does. I'm super happy that we have a workaround that allows us to work in it more quickly. And there's a lot of really, what I'm noticing though is that all over the place, there have been, people that sound really down on it a lot. And I don't blame them. I'm talking about other podcasts. I'm talking about, other chat rooms. I'm talking about in forums, the official ones and elsewhere. And it's one of those, I'm having a hard time keeping it. If I didn't have these three guys to talk to every week, I wouldn't be able to keep a positive attitude about the Foundry. And what can we as a community do? Because I'm hearing, ultimatums if it's not fixed by this point of time, it's, we're going to quit, or, people that have lots of folks that listen to their podcast, talking about how broken it is. And as a community, how do we improve morale, improve the morale of the community? And, that's my question. Cause like I said, if I didn't have three people talking about how things are actually good and, et cetera, that I wouddn't have very good morale right now. And that's my question to everybody out there that actually listens to us. That's my question to anyone at the company that listens. Right now the morale of the people who work with the Foundry is very low. You hear people talking about, I hear people talking about how they don't want to recommend that anyone start using the tool at this point in time. And it's like, there's just morale is low. And how do we fix it? Help me answer that question. I'd really love it.
Yeah. Well, we want to hear from people. So post in the thread or on Starbase UGC, or tweet us. A lot of us are on Twitter.
Yeah, all four. Three of us have Twitters.
Yeah, we're trying to get Mark into it. He's resisting.
We're actually really easy to find. Those names that Drogan announces us with at the beginning of the show.
Those are also our @ handles.
Yeah, just add a little @ at the beginning of those, and you'll find us.
You'll find us.
It's pretty much the same as in game 2.
Yep.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, we are going to say goodnight. So, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.